20 years and one PhD in marine biology later, I finally saved enough to purchase my dream property, an undeveloped coastal lot in a small beach town. The parcel wasn't large, but it had everything I needed: direct beach access, pristine tide pools with several species I'd been documenting for years, and most importantly, it sat just outside the boundaries of the local resort community HOA. "You're sure this property isn't part of the development?" I had asked my real estate agent 3 separate times during the buying process. "Positive," she assured me each time. "I've triple-checked the survey markers, county records, and property maps. Your lot ends exactly 17 feet before the HOA territory begins. That's why it's such a good deal. You get the location without the headache." The headache she referred to was the notorious Paradise Shores HOA, known throughout the county for astronomical fees and rules that micromanaged everything from mailbox height to the shade of white you could paint your house. I'd done my homework, researching property lines, speaking with county officials, and examining historical surveys. The documentation was crystal clear. My dream lot was free and clear of HOA entanglements. I closed on the property in early March and immediately began planning a modest home that would double as a research station. My design was deliberately low impact: solar panels, rainwater collection, native landscaping, and a small observation deck for monitoring the tide pools. Nothing flashy, nothing that would disturb the delicate ecosystem I'd grown to love. By May, I'd received county approval to begin preliminary site work. I spent a weekend clearing some invasive brush and marking boundaries with environmentally friendly stakes made from bamboo. I was carefully cataloging a particularly interesting tide pool when I heard voices approaching from the adjacent property. "Excuse me." The woman's voice carried that particular tone of artificial sweetness that immediately set my teeth on edge. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I turned to face a group of 3 people standing at what I knew was my property line. The woman who had spoken wore expensive-looking athleisure wear and oversized sunglasses. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her arms were crossed in obvious disapproval. "Hello," I replied pleasantly, straightening up from my crouched position by the tide pool. "I'm just doing some preliminary work on my property. I'm Dr. You haven't submitted any construction plans to the architectural committee," she interrupted, "and we have strict rules about disturbing the natural landscape." I blinked, momentarily confused. "I'm sorry, but this property isn't part of your HOA. I specifically purchased it because it falls outside your jurisdiction." The woman gave a dismissive laugh. "That's incorrect. There was a rezoning last year. This entire stretch is now part of Paradise Shores." "That's not possible," I said, keeping my voice calm while reaching for my phone. "I have the surveys and county documentation right here." I pulled up the property documents I'd wisely saved digitally. She barely glanced at my screen. "Those are outdated. I'm the president of the Paradise Shores HOA, and I'm telling you that you're in violation of at least 4 community guidelines. I've prepared a notice for you." One of her companions, a man in golf attire, handed her a formal-looking envelope, which she extended toward me. "You have 72 hours to halt all activity and submit the proper paperwork to our architectural committee. Otherwise, we'll be forced to take corrective action." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The fees for retroactive approval are substantial, but I'm sure you understood the responsibilities when you bought in our beautiful community." I took the envelope but stood my ground. "Again, I'm not part of your HOA. I specifically researched this before purchasing." "The rules apply to everyone," she replied with finality. "We maintain strict standards here. It's why our property values remain so high." As they turned to leave, the third person in their group, an older man, lingered behind. When the others were out of earshot, he leaned toward me. "You might want to check who owns the construction company that gets all the HOA contracts," he muttered. "The president's husband has been trying to get this lot for years. They want to build luxury condos all along this stretch." Before I could respond, he hurried after his companions, leaving me standing there with the ridiculous notice and a growing sense of unease. That evening, I contacted the county recorder's office and confirmed, yet again, that my property was absolutely not part of any homeowners association. I also discovered the HOA president's name. Let's just call her the president for anonymity, and that her husband indeed owned the only construction company authorized to do work in Paradise Shores. As a precaution, I installed motion-activated security cameras around my property perimeter the next day. I also called a real estate attorney, who reassured me that the HOA had no legal standing but suggested documenting everything just in case. "These types of boundary disputes can get messy," he warned. "Some HOAs try to expand their territory through intimidation. Keep records of every interaction." I continued my preliminary work, documenting several rare species in the tide pools and marking areas that would need special protection during construction. 3 days after receiving the notice, I had to travel to a nearby marine research station to collect specialized equipment for my studies. I was gone for just 8 hours. When I returned, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Heavy construction equipment had carved ugly tracks across my property. My carefully placed boundary stakes were gone. A swath of coastal vegetation had been completely bulldozed, including several protected plant species I'd been documenting. Worst of all, one of the bulldozers had driven straight through a significant tide pool, crushing marine life that had taken decades to establish. Attached to a remaining scrub tree was a laminated notice: property remediated for code violations by order of Paradise Shores HOA. I felt physically ill. Years of scientific training had taught me to remain objective, but seeing the deliberate destruction of an ecosystem I had been studying for years broke something inside me. Still, I forced myself to act methodically. I documented everything with photos and video. I collected soil and water samples from the damaged areas. I gathered the torn remnants of rare vegetation. And I downloaded the security camera footage, which clearly showed equipment emblazoned with Paradise Construction LLC trespassing on my property. The footage also captured the president herself directing the operators where to drive, specifically pointing to the largest tide pool and nodding with satisfaction as it was destroyed. I was still cataloging the damage when she appeared at the property line, 2 security guards in tow. "I see you received our message," she said smugly. "Perhaps now you'll understand that Paradise Shores takes its regulations seriously. This is criminal trespassing and destruction of property," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Not to mention environmental violations for destroying protected habitat." She waved her hand dismissively. "You were informed that unauthorized modification of the landscape is prohibited. The architectural committee denied the changes you were making. I never submitted anything to your committee because I'm not part of your HOA." My composure was slipping. "You have no authority here. Our records indicate otherwise." Her smile was cold. "You'll be receiving bills for both the HOA dues you've neglected for the past 3 years and today's necessary remediation work. I suggest you pay promptly to avoid further penalties." Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, her security detail following close behind. That night, I barely slept. By morning, I had formulated a plan that would use my scientific background and attention to detail to fight back. This wasn't just about my property anymore. It was about stopping a corrupt system that had been bullying people for years. My first call was to my attorney, who was appropriately outraged and immediately filed for emergency injunctions against both the HOA and the construction company. My second call was to the State Environmental Protection Agency, where I still had colleagues from my research work. By noon, I had environmental inspectors on site, documenting the destruction of protected coastal habitat. "This is one of the worst cases of unpermitted shoreline disturbance I've seen," the lead inspector told me, shaking his head as he examined the crushed tide pool. "There are at least 3 endangered species affected here." Over the next few days, I discovered the HOA had filed paperwork with the county claiming my lot had always been part of their territory but was incorrectly marked in previous surveys. When I visited local businesses about construction supplies, several awkwardly informed me they couldn't work with outsiders after receiving calls from the HOA. The president had begun a whisper campaign in the small community, suggesting I was an outsider trying to build an eyesore that would decrease property values. Then came letters demanding back HOA dues with penalties totaling nearly $40,000. I might have been intimidated if not for a sympathetic county clerk who quietly pulled me aside during one of my visits to file documentation. "You're not the first," she whispered, glancing around the empty office. "There have been others who mysteriously found themselves incorporated into the HOA boundaries. Most couldn't afford to fight and eventually sold, usually to shell companies that I later traced back to the president's husband." She slid a folder across the counter. "These are copies of property maps from the last 5 years. Notice how the HOA boundaries keep expanding? And look at the digital signatures on the revised documents." The evidence was damning. The same administrative password had been used to modify official county records multiple times, always expanding the HOA territory by small, almost unnoticeable increments. The clerk had highlighted suspicious modifications dating back nearly a decade. "I can't be officially involved," she said, "but I've been keeping records. There are at least 7 other properties they've targeted this way." Armed with this information, I expanded my strategy. First, I brought in researchers from my university to document the ecological damage, giving the case scientific weight that would be hard to dismiss. Second, I filed police reports for trespassing, vandalism, and destruction of property, making sure to provide the security footage. Third, I used the clerk's documentation to trace other affected property owners, eventually locating 3 who had been forced to sell after similar tactics. 2 agreed to join my legal fight. Fourth, I hired a forensic accountant to examine the publicly available HOA financial records, which revealed a pattern of Paradise Construction receiving contracts at inflated rates without competitive bidding. The most damning discovery came when my environmental colleagues found the construction equipment had leaked hydraulic fluid into the protected tide pool area, a serious violation of state and federal environmental laws. Using specialized testing equipment from my lab, we documented contamination levels far exceeding legal limits. The HOA, clearly not expecting such a thorough response, escalated their intimidation. My property was vandalized twice more. Anonymous calls threatened that I would never get building permits in this county. The president filed a restraining order against me, falsely claiming I had threatened HOA board members. But the tide began to turn when local media picked up the story. An environmental reporter did a feature on the destroyed tide pools, complete with before and after photos I had fortunately taken during my research. The article mentioned the suspicious expansion of HOA territories and the convenient awarding of contracts to the president's husband. The president called a special HOA meeting, presumably to rally support against me. What she didn't know was that I had been quietly meeting with individual homeowners, showing them evidence of how their dues had been misappropriated, and how the constant special assessments they paid had funded the president's vacation home in another state. When she tried to pass a special assessment to fund legal action against me, the homeowners revolted, demanding a full audit of HOA finances. The meeting devolved into chaos, with longtime residents discovering they'd been systematically misled for years. 3 months after the initial bulldozing incident, we had our first major court hearing. The HOA attorney tried to argue that historical documents showed my property had always been part of Paradise Shores. My attorney calmly presented the evidence of document tampering, complete with digital timestamps and unauthorized access logs provided by the county IT department. The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as he reviewed the evidence. Your Honor, I testified when called to the stand. As a scientist, I document everything meticulously. I have records of every interaction with county officials confirming my property boundaries, surveys dating back 30 years showing consistent property lines, and evidence that the only changes to these boundaries occurred through unauthorized digital manipulation of county records. The courtroom fell silent when we played the security footage showing the president directing the destruction of the protected tide pools, followed by testimony from the state environmental inspector about the extent of the damage. Based on our assessment, the inspector stated, remediation of the environmental damage alone will cost approximately $350,000, and some species may never recover in this location. The case expanded beyond my property dispute when the forensic accountant testified about financial improprieties within the HOA. He detailed how the president and her husband had diverted over $1.2 million in HOA funds to personal accounts over 5 years through inflated construction contracts and fabricated expenses. The judge called a recess after this testimony. When court resumed, the HOA attorney requested a postponement, which was denied. By day's end, the judge had issued a preliminary ruling. 1. An immediate injunction preventing the HOA from claiming my property or approaching within 100 feet of my boundaries. 2. Freezing of the HOA accounts pending a full financial investigation. 3. A court order for environmental remediation to begin immediately, cost to be determined. As we left the courthouse, a small group of Paradise Shores residents approached me. Their spokesperson, an elderly woman who had lived there since the development began, looked both angry and embarrassed. We had no idea what was being done in our name, she said. Many of us are on fixed incomes and those special assessments were a hardship. We're filing to recall the entire board. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, environmental remediation, and community transformation. State investigators uncovered evidence of years of document falsification, fraud, and embezzlement. The environmental agencies issued fines totaling over $500,000 for damage to protected habitats. The criminal case against the president and her husband moved forward with charges of fraud, document falsification, and misappropriation of funds. They eventually accepted a plea deal rather than face a public trial where even more damaging evidence would have been presented. The court not only confirmed my property wasn't part of the HOA but invalidated several other annexations that had occurred through similar document manipulation. 5 former residents who had been forced out were given the opportunity to repurchase their properties at the original sales prices. When the final judgment came, I was awarded $1.2 million in damages, covering property restoration, environmental remediation, legal fees, and punitive damages for the harassment campaign. The president and her husband were forced to sell their multiple properties to pay restitution and legal costs. Their construction company was barred from municipal contracts for 10 years. Both were sentenced to probation and community service, specifically environmental restoration work. Perhaps the most satisfying outcome was watching the HOA transform under new leadership. The residents elected a retired judge as their new president, adopted transparent financial practices, and reduced their excessive rules to reasonable standards that actually protected property values without micromanaging residents. I used part of my settlement to create a small marine conservation area on my property, with educational facilities open to the public. The restored tide pools became a destination for school field trips and university research projects. Local fishermen, who had initially viewed me with suspicion as an academic outsider, became allies in protecting the coastal ecosystem after seeing how healthy marine habitats improved their catches. When I finally built my home, I deliberately designed it to complement the natural landscape, a model of sustainable coastal development that actually enhanced the surrounding environment. The irony wasn't lost on me that property values throughout the area increased due to the positive publicity around the marine conservation efforts. Last month, on the one-year anniversary of the court decision, I hosted an open house and Marine Education Day. Over 200 people attended, including many Paradise Shores residents who had once been convinced I was their enemy. The new HOA board presented me with a formal apology and an environmental partnership agreement. We now collaborate on sustainable landscaping practices that protect the coastal ecosystem while maintaining the aesthetic standards important to the community. Yesterday, I was documenting the tide pools and discovered a species of sea anemone returning to the restored habitat, one I feared had been permanently displaced by the bulldozing. As I carefully photographed this small sign of ecological healing, I reflected on how a terrible act of destruction had ultimately led to greater protection for this fragile ecosystem. The president and her husband no longer live in the area. I heard they moved several states away to escape the local notoriety. Sometimes I wonder if they're trying similar schemes in their new community, but I take comfort knowing that their court records will follow them wherever they go. As for me, I finally have my dream home by the sea, complete with a state-of-the-art research station. The path here wasn't what I expected, but standing up to corruption and protecting this special place has made it even more meaningful. In fighting for my property rights, I ended up creating something that benefits the entire community, proof that sometimes teaching someone a lesson can lead to positive change for everyone. Except the bullies, of course. They got exactly what they deserved. The next one is entitled People Story. This is a tough one and I'm genuinely curious to know what people think. So here goes. I have a coworker called Caroline, who, as you can guess, is disabled. She's in a motorized wheelchair and can't really move a lot but is still very capable of her job, and a lovely, fun person in general, BTW. We were talking on a break about dating and dating apps, how I had never used one and how she did, talking about her experiences. Casual conversation, really, and we were careful not to go into detail or anything or make each other uncomfortable till this came up. She brought up how she didn't disclose that she was in a wheelchair/disabled on her Tinder bio, because it tended to scare people off or make people uncomfortable when they chat through the app. This confused me because it's very obvious she is in a wheelchair, and if they went on a date in person they would find that out very fast. There is absolutely no way she can function in daily life without it, so she can't exactly stash it nearby or something and just sit on a chair during the date. She also told me that she does not tell them all until they show up to the date and see the fact she is in a wheelchair right in front of them. Anyway, I, maybe stupidly, pointed out that is it not dishonest to not share that she is in a wheelchair on her bio, or disclose it to potential partners before meeting for the first time? She told me that everyone on dating apps lies about stuff, so she didn't see the big deal. I told Caroline that it's not like hiding you have a twin or an accent or a particular way of looking. This is something that will heavily impact their dating life with you and they should be aware of that going in. She's a wonderful person and shouldn't feel awkward about it. And there are plenty of people out there who aren't fazed by their partners being in wheelchairs, so I didn't think she should lie about it. She went off in a huff saying I didn't understand, but now I'm worried I've somehow been the a-hole by telling her this. I know it's not really my business and I never would have told her this if she didn't ask me/hadn't brought the subject up at all. I just didn't want to lie to her about what I thought and I tried to be tactful, but I think it blew up in my face. Am I the a-hole? Quick clarifications. She asked what I thought when she mentioned how she hid her disability on the app. I'm guessing she saw my surprise in my face when she said that. I would never tell her, or anyone, my opinion on a delicate matter like this if they didn't ask me first. Date. Since there's been a few questions or comments about various parts of this, I feel obligated to share more info. I apologized immediately after she got huffy with me. I did not just let the matter sit. Whilst she is still a little bit off with me, we have not stopped speaking by any means. Whilst she is a co-worker, I would say we are also light friends given we get dinner together once a week and catch movies together, share hobbies, etc. But I don't know how well our connection would be if we didn't see each other 5 days a week, if that makes any sense. There are people you meet through work that become lifelong friends and those that are friends throughout their shared workplace but fade after. I just don't know where we stand in terms of that yet. I have stated, and continue to point out, that I never would have said what I thought if she had not asked me for my opinion. It isn't my business how she dates, and I fully understand, even if I can't relate, that dating with a disability is not easy, and there is a lot of warning signs she needs to be aware of, like people with fetishes and so on. And I recognize that she should not put the information in her bio. However, to not disclose it before the first date, when they are about to meet in person for the first time, is the main point. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, We met today at work and had lunch together, as we often do, and she brought up the conversation from the other day. Caroline admitted that she wasn't angry with me but more with herself, because, in her words, I know it isn't right to not tell them if we're going to meet up, but I think it's easier to hide it at first and judge their reaction in person. I know it's not the right thing to do if I really like a guy, but sometimes it's less daunting when they don't know. I explained I understood and that I didn't judge her. I just hoped she could understand that she asked me what I thought, and I don't like to lie, but I probably should have not said anything. We agreed that it's a very nuanced subject and each person with disabilities has it different, so it's hard to say what works for each person. Caroline said she would try being more honest in the future with potential partners, and I said it wasn't my place to judge and I wished her luck with dating in the future. All in all, we both acknowledged we were both a holes and not a holes. It's a difficult subject and neither of us has a place to say what everyone should or shouldn't do when dating. The next one is entitled People Story. I, 30F, recently had a baby. This is my second child, and my first child with my husband, 31M. I thought I'd love this baby with all my heart, considering my husband and I have an insanely wonderful relationship. He has also taken in my first child like his own, and we have a perfect family. But truthfully, I can't stand this baby. My firstborn is perfect in my eyes. Clever, beautiful, well-behaved. I love spending time with her. She is my soulmate of babies. Even as a newborn I absolutely adored her. This baby, another girl, just ain't it. Even the pregnancy was terrible. The childbirth was terrible. Everything about her is just awful. She cries nonstop. She's not as cute as my firstborn. She spends all of her awake time being pissed off. She's 8 weeks old, and I spend my days just waiting for my husband to get home so I can give her to him. I haven't told him about this either, because this is his only baby. I'm sure in his eyes, she's a perfect little angel. Of course I'll never act on anything. Anytime she cries I respond. I love on her, talk to her, treat her just as I would my firstborn. Even when nobody is around, I love on this baby the way a baby needs to be loved. Smiles, kind voices, cuddles, kisses, everything. I'm just so over this kid. Maybe if I could spend 5 minutes of my time with her without her screaming in my face, maybe I could bond. Even when she's not crying, she just ignores me. I hate everything about this, and really don't care for this baby. And I'll take this secret to the grave with me. But I really wish my heart had room for this kid. Edit below. I wasn't expecting this to blow up. I will post an update in a few months. Hopefully a positive one. A few notes though. Before jumping to a poor baby terrible mother BS, please do research. This is not uncommon for a mom to not bond. I'm just the ballsy one to say it on Reddit on a throwaway account. She is not abused. She is the light of my husband's life. She is always in your arms. Her big sister is obsessed and absolutely adores her baby sister. If anything, I spent all my waking hours trying to bond with her, so this little one gets extra cuddles and attention. I don't hate the baby. I just don't like her. I don't wish anything bad on her. For those asking, no, we have absolutely no support. No friends, no family, as this is a new city for us. I haven't even slept in my own bed since her birth, as my husband works 60 hours a week and he can't function with baby waking him up. I haven't had a 4-hour-long sleep since her birth. I haven't been able to cook a meal in 8 weeks. I'm lucky if I get a 10-minute shower. Yes, I'm in therapy / been working with a doctor for PPD. Yes, baby is seeing a doctor for possible reflux issues / milk allergy, and we are currently trying a specialized formula. About a month ago I made a post about how much I didn't like my newborn. She was 8 weeks old. Well, a few days later I took her back to the doctor. He put her on dairy-free formula, Alimentum, which smells like potato stroganoff. Ew. The changes started overnight, and the very next day, I woke up and looked in her bassinet to see an awake baby giving me the biggest, cheesiest smile in the world. Since then her personality has shown through drastically. It's honestly really fun to witness. My husband has also been an enormous help. Reassuring, letting me sleep, helping every moment he can. He also went back down to a normal amount of hours at work, to help me more. It's still rough. She still doesn't sleep fully through the night. I consider her being a little more of a firecracker to be part of her personality. She might never be as easy as her sister. But I wouldn't change her if I could. Her sister and her are night and day, totally different. But I can honestly say I love it. I love having one angel, and one fired up rebel. Having this little semen demon smiling at me really changed so much in my head. Even in the worst moments I know she loves me, and I just melt over her. She's got the most beautiful smile in the world, along with all her hilarious angry faces. To anyone else going through what I did, give yourself some grace. This phase will pass. Her turning a page development-wise, plus SSRIs for PPD, have absolutely changed our relationship. I can very honestly say I no longer have a favorite child. They're both incredible. The next one is entitled People Story. Saw someone's post yesterday about navigating life with a partner who has fibromyalgia and felt inspired to post here. I'm hoping y'all can give me some solid advice. I, 26F, have been with my boyfriend, 30M, for a little under 2 years. In the time we've been together, his chronic pain, which isn't connected to any particular/known condition as he refuses to go to the doctor, has gotten worse and worse. It's reached a point where he's almost incapable of doing chores or house projects. He's usually too exhausted/in pain to make or agree to plans, and getting him to do anything outside of the house together is like pulling teeth. His objections always revolve around his pain and fatigue. I've never suffered from chronic pain, and thank God, so I'm not one to judge or accuse someone of making it up since the pain itself is invisible, and my boyfriend looks perfectly healthy, but he's now been unemployed for about 4 months and I'm starting to question things. I'm starting to feel doubtful for a number of reasons, and the main ones are that A, he never turns down his friends' invitations to hang out, even when the activity is something physically intense like kayaking, or going hiking, or going to a music festival, and B, he is never too tired/in too much pain to have sex. Over time, it's almost made it seem like he's conveniently in an unbearable amount of pain when he has to do something he isn't all that interested in, i.e. chores, and I'm starting to feel hurt that he just doesn't seem to want to hang out with me outside of what we do lazing around the house. I've never accused him of faking or exaggerating his pain, but I have tried to talk to him about doing more fun stuff together, and it always circles back to his pain or him accusing me of trying to keep him from spending time with his friends, which I'm not trying to do by any means. I've done a ton of research into autoimmune disorders and other conditions that could be causing his problem, always bringing my findings and suggestions to him, but he just doesn't believe a doctor or any traditional medicine will help him. I'm also bothered because when we go to family outings or parties that we're both invited to, it's rare, but it does happen, he will talk anyone who will listen's ear off about how bad his chronic pain is and how frustrating it is to not be able to find a solution. The thing is, he's not actually looking for a solution. He just smokes weed every day and calls that good enough while lamenting and complaining that his body is the way that it is. He also refuses to return to work because of his pain. For additional context, he seems to have really extreme muscle spasms/tightness, particularly in his back. I'm happy to support him through hard times, but the fact that he won't work is getting concerning and I feel severely stuck. I'm not interested in supporting him financially on a long-standing basis, but at the moment I partially am by covering some of his expenses. If this post makes me a total a-hole for questioning the degree of my boyfriend's chronic pain, so be it. I just need help and answers. So, here are my questions. Where do I go from here? Do you think it's possible that my boyfriend is using his pain as a crutch? Should I put some kind of ultimatum in place that will get him medical care/attention? Your advice is appreciated. Update: thank you to everyone who responded to my post and was so compassionate and kind. It was incredible to hear from so many people who actively battle chronic pain/illness and those with loved ones who do. I hope to continue deepening my empathy towards anyone who is struggling with an invisible illness. On to my update. Armed with some fresh perspectives, and some fresh frustrations, lol, I talked to my boyfriend and told him that he needs to see a doctor or I will no longer be able to support him financially and stand by while he remains unemployed and unmotivated to get the help he needs. I also addressed the idea of managing/balancing his energy levels differently so that we're able to share household responsibilities more effectively, spend quality time together, and keep him doing the things he loves with his friends. His response was really bad. He told me that if I'm not willing to step up and clean around the house, something I'm already doing, that there's no use living together and that my efforts to clean are the bare minimum and not good enough for his standards anyway. He was also really mad that I haven't taken initiative to take care of yard projects and car repairs. He sat there and spouted off a whole list of things I'm not noticing and cleaning. And, once again, he was focused on this idea that I don't like his friends/am jealous of them and want him spending less time with them, which isn't true at all. This really stung. He basically brushed over everything I said and focused on my perceived faults. This told me everything I need to know and I told him I was leaving. He was just mad, not sad or hurt at all. I'm still crying excessively over his whole reaction. I still don't know how real or unreal his chronic pain is, but I guess it doesn't matter anymore. Thank you again, everyone, for your support and kindness. I'm truly at a loss. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.